So, good afternoon. It's my honor and my privilege to be having this fireside chat with an Armenian Wonder Woman, Sheila Paylan. Sheila, you have around 20 years of experience in international human rights law, and you chose a few years ago to move to Yerevan. After working in The Hague, in the Congo, in Cambodia, and many other places, to dedicate your expertise to Armenia. You played a crucial role in Armenia's ratification of the Rome Statute, which has allowed accession to the International Criminal Court, Armenia's accession to the International Criminal Court. And you have been recently sharing expertise in the ICJ and ICC cases as well against Israel. Today, there are over 50 active conflicts in the world, around the world, many of which have become protracted conflicts. At the same time, there's a global perception that multilateral institutions, which after World War II were created as stabilizers to ensure the peace and the stability of the world and to end impunity, seem today to have been weakened by exactly some of the countries that set them up. And having this as a backdrop, sadly, women's rights are often becoming an afterthought. So we have way too many priorities right now to think about these women's rights. So Sheila, you wake up every morning, and I know this, trying to do your part to uphold international human rights law and to ensure that truth is sought and justice is served. What inspired you to pursue a career in human rights law, and particularly to return to Armenia? Can you share a defining moment in your career that solidifies your commitment to human rights advocacy? And can you tell us about your experience working in Armenia and advising the government of Armenia?
Yeah. Thank you, Karma. Thanks for everyone for being here. I don't think my story is particularly exciting because I have to live it every day, but I love it when people ask me this question because I'm like, am I going to bore the room? It's been 3.5 years I'm in Armenia now, and I feel like this year is a year that things are coming a little bit full circle. What really started me on this epiphany of human rights for me started in Armenia in 1997. And I was 17 years old, and I went to, it was like my first time, I was really young, and I went to Tsitsernakapet to pay my respects to my ancestors who perished in the Armenian genocide, and the flame was not lit. And so this is a long story short, but in that moment, I had this snap where I was like, I don't want anyone to feel this way. I don't want anyone to grow up with stories of genocide in their lives, and then they have to deal with the geopolitics of not having enough gas and not being able to pay their respects at the eternal flame. That was the moment, you know? And it was a long time before I went to law school, like I was 17 at the time, but full circle, I had a 15-year career with the United Nations. I worked on almost every conflict except Artsakh. It was always a bit of a blind spot for me. And then in 2020, when this big bad war happened, I had another snap, and I said, what have I been doing? You know, I wasn't paying attention to this. But I knew that I had been prepared for that time, for that moment. I had all this knowledge and all this expertise that I developed. And I was meant to go back to the UN, but instead I said, I'm going to Armenia. So I came here, and I was welcomed by the Office of the High Commissioner of Diaspora, and I, you know, sort of clunkily tried to integrate myself into the government to lend my expertise, because I said, look, I investigate war crimes for a living, and I do it for the UN. You guys need to listen to me, I can help. And it was really like, who are you? What are you doing here? I said, okay. And I mean, it was a dance, you know, it was sometimes an ugly dance where I had to leave and really pound my fists, and other times really be gentle and, you know, a bit like a toxic ex that you go back to. You know, you're like, okay, I'm going to ignore you for a while so you realize that you have to go, you know what I mean? And yeah, I mean, one of the first things I said when I arrived was, we need to ratify the Rome Statute, we need to join the ICC, and I was laughed at. I mean, it was really not at all even, no, but the situation was different then, but I said, Azerbaijan is at our front door. They're at the front door. They're going to come through that door, and the minute they come through that door and we're not part of the ICC, you won't be laughing anymore. And so it's, you know, all these things. Leaving the UN was super scary for me. It was my career. I was on the rise, and one thing I couldn't do though was use my voice. I couldn't speak at the UN. You're muzzled. And here, I was able to speak and gathered the courage to do it. And one of the biggest things I kept saying was, join the ICC. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then finally we did it. And I remember when that happened, I said, oh my God, like, I can have impact, you know? If you really persevere, we can change things. So Armenia's been an incredible place for me to make my dreams come true, to make things happen, and to see, despite so much tragedy, despite so much, yeah, tragedy is the word, right? We can also turn things around here. So I don't know if that doesn't really fully answer all the questions.
It answers, but I still have more questions for you. In her opening speech this morning, for those of you who are here, Silva mentioned that AIWA took their advocacy to the ICC, in The Hague, with the Center of Truth and Justice, to draw attention to critical issues, particularly concerning the dignity and rights of women, of Armenian women. What are, in your opinion, the most pressing women's issues currently facing Armenia? And what are some of the initiatives that you are currently working on to keep the spotlight on these issues, Sheila?
So, as much as I'm a gender expert, but I focus more on conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence, so that's not so much in Armenia at the moment. The most pressing issue in Armenia for women's rights is still domestic violence. It is domestic violence, hands down. But then there's the more insidious problem of which it just underwrites everything, is how far backwards we still are, no matter what anyone tells me, in terms of gender equality. It's the gender stereotypes, the deep-seated beliefs of a woman's role, like what we saw, like I didn't even know those books were in the bookstore across the street. I'm gonna go and buy them all now. No, I shouldn't buy them actually. I'm gonna go and throw them away. Like, they're terrible, yeah? We're so far behind, and that was also something when I moved here, born and raised in Montreal, Canada. I was like, am I really gonna live somewhere where I have to struggle like 10 steps back? I wasn't born into this. I don't need this. I don't need to work so hard, you know? But then I think you can't walk away from that. You know, you have to do your part. So I've worked with OSCE to work on gender-based hate crimes here. I do a lot of gender-based work with LGBTQ persons. And mostly I just sort of try to embody what I believe to be the role of a woman in Armenia, which is anything you want, you know? Like, no one is going to stop me from living my fullest, best life, no matter what. And I think, you know, I try to empower other women by doing it. I don't need to have a big training session. I don't need to have a big conference. I mean, these are very valuable, of course, always, always, always. But for me personally, I'll do this, you know, and then I'll have the conversation, and we have to empower women and also do it very authentically. Like, I do see very strong women in Armenia, but sometimes I feel like they shapeshift and that they try to become it's like something that they're not, rather than you can really just be yourself and be okay with that and do whatever you want. Like, and that's okay. Like, it's revolutionary, you know? And so, yeah, I write about it for EVN Report every chance I get. It's more like living, breathing, eating it, yeah?
So you... You mentioned that the conflict, Artsakh, was always a blind spot for you. You worked, you know, you've told me many funny stories about working with, or against, warlords in different countries, and if you could share some of those, it would be interesting, just so we can draw, you know, sort of lessons of how working in patriarchal systems is difficult, but also how you can break those glass ceilings. But with your work here, I'm curious to know more about what your, this is a question everyone always asks me when it comes to Lebanon, but what is the time frame for justice? How long is this marathon? And with the work that you're currently doing, if we were to say, we want justice and we want accountability, what are we really looking at in terms of time, resources needed, efforts channeled, political sort of unity, political will, the role of the diaspora? I mean, I can go on and on, so you get the gist of my question.
That's a big question. It's true. I say it as a joke, but it's actually totally true. You know, when I worked in the Congo, I was in the middle of the Congo. Congo's huge, in a really remote part where there had been this horrific civil war from 2016 to 2018. And in Congo is a place where the use of rape as a weapon of war is really like known for it, yeah, and they're horrific stories. So I was working with military prosecutors. These are very dangerous people, and warlords, very dangerous, like really scary guys who kill a lot. And I was working with them to investigate war crimes, and they took me, of course I had to like develop a rapport with them so that they trusted me, but it was easier to do that, and I gained their respect more and faster than I did here in Armenia. I had it was a tougher crowd here, and I was like, I would say to people like, haha, I'm like, no, it's like, I'm serious. You know, like I still get texts from, you know, the general in the middle of Congo going, Sheila, when are you coming back? I'm like, you know, so I'm like, I'm still struggling with here. But anyway, it's so that's a little disconcerting. But what in terms of justice, and that is where, you know, a lot of people want women involved in the peace process, and that's sort of the women, peace, and security, and so they try to fit me in there. But I always say I'm coming in from the justice perspective. Justice is my thing. This is my bread and butter. And you cannot have peace without justice, which also ruffles some feathers sometimes, but you really can't. Depends which comes first, but they have to come together at some point. Timeline. There is no timeline. There's no statute of limitations on this. If we think about the Armenian genocide, you know, we still want justice for that, but there is a statute of limitations in the sense that when the perpetrator dies, the crime dies with them. So that's, you know, that ship has sort of more or less sailed unless we can frame the denial of the Armenian genocide as an ongoing crime, which I think we can. Here, what we have with Artsakh, with what just happened, we have a real chance. We really have a chance, but we need to get our bleep together, okay? Because
our act together.
Yeah, oh, thank you. I don't know.
I think it's the word you're looking for.
That's so much better than bleep. Your insert expletive together. We're still so emotional, and we're in a rush. So this is something I'm going to say we need to like slow it down because we can make mistakes. What's happening right now with the ICJ case is amazing. To me, it's not enough. To me, there's still more we can do, but it's still really, really, really amazing. And what we have now with the ICC, it's such an uphill battle, but it's not impossible. It is within our reach, and we have 50 years if we want. We have, as long as Aliyev is alive, we have as long as these people are alive, we can still get justice. So I mean, in terms of how many resources, it's hard to answer, but I don't see this taking, if we really all get together and do it exactly right, or as close to right as possible with the diplomatic strategies, advocacy, all of that, between 3 and 5 years, I'm sure we could get some kind of referral, I mean, that's just like a rough estimate. I don't see it happening if we don't work together. I mean it. Like, so something as simple as submitting a communication to the ICC prosecutor. Every NGO is doing one. Why? Why are they all doing it separately? What is the point of that? Everyone has a piece of the puzzle. They hold on to it, they hide it, they do it, they make a show of it. And then I'm like, well, great. Where are we going with that? Nowhere. You're all going in different directions. So I hope someday, the ego gets out of the way. I think we really need to put our ego aside. Like, Armenia matters way more than your ego, right? So I hope that we'll get there. But we might have to keep making a few mistakes first. So
Armenia does matter more than egos. That's for sure. I don't want to be repetitive because Sheila is going to be at a roundtable. So everyone here, please join the roundtable on Sunday, on June 2nd at the American University of Armenia, where she will be talking more about the role of women, specifically in diplomacy and the women, peace, and security agenda. So again, I do not want to be repetitive, but this is a fireside chat. It's really quick. Keep you engaged in the audience, listening. So I just want to ask you, what can you tell young international human rights lawyers, young activists, who are in the beginning of their careers, they are or still undecided on what they want to do, and encourage them to take this path? Because we come also from a culture where women are often told, politics is dirty, it's corrupt, law is, what they say about lawyers, don't. So there's this culture that perpetuates, in Lebanon, I always use this, politics is dirty, and you always tell us we have to be in the kitchen, so maybe we should clean it up, right? So in a sense, what would you tell these young men and women, about this joint inclusive effort that we need to sort of launch, and how, a lot of them may be in this cruel and unjust world, to convince them that justice is still attainable is difficult, because we're seeing what's happening around us, and we're seeing, some leaders go with impunity and all that. So what would you tell them to keep them engaged and to encourage them to be, choosing this path as a career?
Well, I would never firstly recommend anyone to choose this path as a career. No, I mean, I wouldn't discourage it, but I wouldn't go, you should do this. It's a bit like depressing. Yeah, there isn't that much. Yeah, but you also don't have to do it as a career. Like, if you don't, I know it sounds, for some people it sounds really exciting and glam. It's not. It's like, it's thrilling for me because I love it, but it's also quite sad, You're dealing a lot with really sad and terrible situations. It's not the best way to live. And you don't have to become a human rights lawyer to be an advocate for human rights all the time, I actually had a TED Talk recently, and it hasn't come out yet, but I talk about this, how to make human rights a way of life. If you want to be a human rights lawyer, do it, go for it. The biggest advice I would give is never let anything get you jaded or cynical. Never, hold on to that optimism. You will get a lot of people calling you naive, even stupid. Oh, it's all politics. It's not just that politics are dirty, that it's only politics that matter, and that's it. So who cares about law? Nobody cares about human rights. Well, okay, I'm just well, I don't care if that's what you think. We cannot live in a world without it. We cannot, because I don't want to live in that world. I don't think anyone else does. So you might sound more with it or real with realpolitik, but that's a really sad world that I don't want to live in. So I would say don't lose that even idealism, but then everyone, whether you work in tech or finance or whatever, or if you don't have a job, you can still be push the human rights agenda forward. If you care about living in a good and better world, you have to care about human rights. You can't get real. You got to get real about human rights, yeah? And, I'll let you watch the TED Talk when it comes out. But it's really, it comes down to standing up for what you believe in, never sitting on the sidelines and just being neutral about stuff. I think that's quite dangerous. And feeling fear, fine, but doing things anyway. Stand up for what you believe in all the time, every chance you get. It's really that simple, but I believe in, people being allowed to express themselves. I believe in people being free from torture. I believe in people being able to vote and live in democratic countries, and I believe in putting despots in jail. I love that stuff, I can't wait to see Aliyev in jail. It's going to be my life's mission. I can't wait. But yeah, and so I think it's really the most important thing is to do something you love, but in the meantime, be nice to each other, and what else yeah.
Well, Sheila Paylan, may you continue to have the passion, the patience, the courage, and the support to do what you do. Thank you for being with us today.